heard Jerry talk today about cotton and sort of the insect side of things and where we're going. It's an exciting time to be working in cotton in Oklahoma. It's an exciting time to be working in cotton, really, in general. You know, we've had some pretty good years in a row here in the state. A lot of that is we're hitting a pretty good environment. We're in good conditions to produce cotton. So we're producing a lot of pounds. But cotton, maybe more so than any other crop, is kind of a two-faced kind of deal. Pounds are important, and we need to make pounds. But you can make a lot of pounds of bad cotton too. And so fiber quality is key for profitability of cotton and how we sustain production. And so that's what we're really going to focus on today. We can talk about, you know, making high yields the rest of the year, but this is kind of a good time to talk about fiber quality. So I don't expect you to read this, obviously, but this is kind of what I'm looking at a lot this year. So this is the weekly classroom report we get from the Abilene office. So this is the Oklahoma side of that report. They actually get cotton from 3 different states. They get cotton from a lot of Central Texas gens. They get cotton from all the Oklahoma gens, and they get cotton from all the Kansas gens. And so they class those samples. And you can look at the full report, or you can look at it divided up by states. One thing is, in this state, and I don't really have a good handle on this, I know it's a lot of our cotton is not ginned in Oklahoma. I wish it was, but because of where our cotton is and where gins in Texas and Kansas are, we send a lot of cotton out of Oklahoma to get ginned. And so it makes it a little bit harder to track down all the Oklahoma acres, but this gives us a good idea of what we're seeing from Oklahoma. We'll come back to that in a little bit. I want to talk about all the parameters that we look at on those sheets, all these fiber quality parameters. And so prior to being here at OSU, I was in the same role, cotton specialist, for Texas A&M, and I was based in Lubbock. And in Lubbock, we have one of the best cotton breeders in the country. I don't care if it's university or industry, Jane Deaver. She's a great cotton breeder to talk to. And I'm not a geneticist or a breeder background. I don't have a fiber quality, expertise. But people like this make it really easy to learn from. And so if you ever get a chance to meet Dr. Deaver, she's great. So this is from her. So we have the different fiber quality parameters here. And we have 2 kind of categories on what influences fiber quality. So it can be influenced by genetics, so a variety component, whether it's a direct influence like fiber length. Fiber length is one of those things we've bred for years to try to catch this upper end market that we used to see with other cotton species, Pima cotton mainly. And so 70% of what we see from fiber length is directly a genetic effect. It's them selectively breeding for a variety that has long fibers. We also can see indirect effects, so length uniformity, or even Micronaire. A lot of these have to do with maturity. And so there's maturity characteristics of cotton varieties, and those are going to have some influence on a lot of these properties. And then there's other properties, such as mic and uniformity, that are more reliant on the environment as sort of what's going to influence them throughout the year and what we're going to get from them from a quality component. Are we getting a discount? Are we getting premiums? Or somewhere in between due to the environment those are exposed to. And then we got stuff like leaf grades, color, and then bark and prep, which I hope we don't see a whole lot of, that are kind of a play of both. But a lot of it is environmentally influenced in how we treat those crops. Leaf harvest conditions can play a role, picking versus stripping, humidity levels, do we catch a freeze? But also, it's very directly involved with the pubescence or the leaf hairiness. So hairs on a leaf, hairs on bracts will impact leaf grade or trash grade. There's been a lot of work done with that. So there's a lot of things that go into fiber quality, and we're trying to just tease some of these out and what we can and can't influence through management or variety selection. So I'm starting with Micronaire. So coming from the high plains in Lubbock, this is one of the #1 issues that we're going to run into year in, year out in a short season environment is immature fiber, which leads to low mic. So it's a rough reflection of fiber maturity. And really what it is Micronaire is a rough influence of the buildup of secondary cell walls in a cotton fiber. A cotton fiber is made up of cellulose. And in the second half of the development cycle of a fiber, it's adding those layers of cellulose inside of that fiber. And there's certain levels you want to get to for fiber quality properties. Again, typically that's the most challenging property to really capitalize on in a short season environment because we may not have enough time to mature all the bolls on a plant. So we could end up harvesting the crop with immature fiber. You typically see bolls that are set in less favorable conditions late in the year where we're going to run out of heat units. Well, typically low mic. If you look at what happened in 2017 in the high plains, and I'm going to pull a lot of data from that. That was my last year in Texas, so I was there, but it was a great example of a poor fiber quality year. We had cloudy, rainy, cooler conditions in August and September. That's when a lot of bolls are being set. So we're past a lot of the peak flowering, but a lot of those bolls are being set, that fiber is being developed. And if we run a little short on heat, on sunlight, or anything that affects photosynthesis during that time, we can hurt our fiber maturity. So Micronaire, or that cell wall thickening, occurs in the second half of the fiber development process. So that kind of puts it in perspective, and I'll talk about the first half in a minute. So Micronaire, if you want to get, I guess, optimistic, we can also call it a measure of fiber fineness. I hear that a lot. Maybe it wasn't low mic, maybe it was just really fine fiber. It makes it sound better. Steel grade's the same. So some of the issues with this, low mic or fine fibers can result in harvesting ginning issues. So you think about it, a lot of what we're doing in the gin, on the stripper, on a picker, is moving fiber through by air. If we get fine fibers, we can have problems moving that fiber through. It can lead to a lot of issues. In 2017, when it got drier and we had a lot of fine fiber, we had a lot of fires. And a lot of that was kind of related back to we had just a lot of fine fiber laying around. So from the end user standpoint, I mean, we're trying to make fabric here. We're making yarn, and a lot of cotton is going to be dyed once it gets to the spinning mill of the factory. If we have low mic fibers, they're going to be more difficult to dye. And so not all of the fibers in a garment or in a yarn or whatever are going to have the same mic. So if we've got some mature and some immature fibers, we're going to end up with an uneven dye pattern. And so you can imagine from the end user, that is not something that they are going to look forward to dealing with. They want to see something that's going to look even, nice, uniform dye pattern. Again, it's environmental. So we can see it occur on a regional basis. Wide areas can be exposed to bad conditions, and we get wide areas, large amounts of low mic cotton at once. 2017, huge yield year in a lot of West Texas. So we had a bunch of cotton coming in, but we had a bunch of low mic cotton. And folks were scrambling to get even base mic levels to sell because we had such an influx and just an excess of low mic, and it's just really hard to move that. High mic can also be an issue. I'm not really going to get way into high mic right now, but it's same thing. It's not going to be as desirable for the spending market as sort of our target mic level. So this is straight out of the loan or the classification book from Cotton Incorporated on how we classify cotton. So you'll see mic. It's a unitless measurement. 34. So sometimes you'll see 2 digits, sometimes you'll see a decimal, same thing. 3.4 or 34 is the same. And below, we're in the discount range, and then same thing, that 5.0 or 50 and above. So that's too fine or too mature or too high of a mic. This kind of middle ground is where we want to be. That base range, 3.5 to 3.6 or 4.3 to 4.9 is typically that base, and then the premium is at 3.7 to 4.2 range, where we'll hopefully see a premium. And sometimes, again, we can even see premiums if we hit base, depends on the year and what's out there. So we're going to see a lot of influence from 2 different camps. Again, it's the variety of the genetics, or it's the environment that we're growing cotton in. And so 2017, again, low mic year, and there's a lot of theories out there as to what caused it. We've seen a humongous turnover in varieties, and this is a whole nother thing to get into. But if you look at the varieties planted year in and year out, our varieties planted market almost flips completely over within about 3 or 4 years. And so we don't get a lot of experience with varieties under a variety of conditions for a long time because they're just in and out of the market so quick. So we were saying, oh, this variety low mics, it's an immature variety, but we go back and look. And so we had a lot of on-farm variety trials in 2017 from a lot of locations across the South Plains and Central Plains, so right around Lubbock. We had 8 varieties that were in all of our trials. I think there was 11 locations represented here, and we just averaged them over all the varieties. So what effect did variety have on Micronaire in the low mic year? So you see here from the top to the second from the bottom, it's a 2/10 of a unit difference in mic. So this very bottom one is a very long season variety. It ended up being very immature at several locations. And so that kind of drops out. But you look, and really everything on there is fairly low mic. We got one, well, if you round this one up to a 3-4, we got two that are in the base range, and they're on the very lower end of that base range. So low mic environment, we're going to see low mic from every variety. It's an environmental thing. It's a big influence. So let's look at that. Let's look at the environments we were in. We averaged 3-4 across all of our trials. If we take the environments that we had a little bit better conditions in, and these were typically counties or farms that were either east of Lubbock, the city of Lubbock, or south. We had, I believe, 5 of those, 6 of those. There we saw between 3.5 and 3.74. That's a trial average. That's average of that location. Everything's base. We look at the ones that were in Lubbock, going north or west. Everything's low. Those are those location averages there. So the environment played a huge role in maturing that fiber, the Micronaire levels. And that was really the story of 2017. It wasn't the variety. We'd see a little bit of difference in variety at one location, but generally a low mic location was a low mic location. This kind of shows you the variability in mic, and maybe volatility is a better word for it. You get that one that's kind of at the bottom. It's not; these aren't in the same order as what you see up here ranked. So I don't know how well this shows up. I can't really see the colors that well from here, but this is that one variety that kind of dropped out of every trial. Outside of that, you see in these locations the volatility in terms of, you know, if one bottoms out at one or one is at top of one, the next trial we go to, the next location we go to, it may be near the bottom, it may be in the middle. So environment to environment has a big influence, or location to location has a big influence on how these varieties rank among each other in Micronaire. So now let's flip over to staple, or fiber length. So cotton folks, we were always going to call this staple. Even when I read it in inches, I still call it staple. So it's basically staple length is a 32nd of an inch. So a 32 staple is 1 inch long. It's the easy way to think about it. So staple is highly dependent on genetics. We can have some influence. Extreme weather can obviously influence fiber development. And then ginning processes. So excessive cleaning in the gin. If we're running through those lint cleaners multiple times, we can end up breaking fibers. We can lower that staple length. But really, you think about, you know, what was the big focus of variety development for, and even now, but for the last 10 years for sure, was that staple length. Was getting us to levels that we were seeing from the Pima market. So the Pima market is typically known as the ELS, extra long staple cotton. Those are those ones you see, the Egyptian cotton a lot of times, that real premium fiber that you'll see in the nice, you know, sheets and shirts and stuff, that high thread count. That's where we were trying to get to. And we're starting to see that now. You're starting to see varieties that will gin and will produce staples in the high 30s and even into the 40s. And so that's really been the goal of the breeding efforts. So talked about Micronaire and fiber thickening occurring in that last half of fiber development. So after that flower is pollinated and those fibers initiate on the surface of the seed, the very next thing that starts happening is those fibers begin to grow. So those single cells begin to elongate. And so typically we'll see fiber elongation or that staple length set in the first 2 to 3 weeks after pollination, after anthesis. And so when we talk about conditions, a lot of times we talk about the conditions that are occurring in that time period if we do see an impact from the weather. So what staple is, when you see staple length, that is the average length of the upper half of the fibers. So it's not the average length of every fiber in that sample from that bale. It's the upper half average length. So this is going to directly impact the efficiency of the spinning process. If you ever see the spinning mills, a lot of times the strength and uniformity have an impact too. We'll cover that in a minute. But talk about ends down. So that's when fibers breaking on those bobbins and they have to go back and manually refix them. So having long fiber makes the spinning process more efficient. That's why long staple is so desirable for our end market. And we'll typically see those premium for longer fiber, especially for hiring goods. And the one thing to remember is that it's not just a one parameter deal. We're not just selling long fiber. We've got to have long fiber with good mic, good uniformity. So a lot of things can play a role. So just long staple doesn't really move the needle, but it's part of the total package of fiber quality. So to kind of illustrate the difference between that fiber length component being a variety component and Micronaire being environmental, same kind of data. So this is those same varieties we saw a minute ago, same locations averaged overall. So you see staple length is ranging from this FiberMax 1830 to 38, average across all those locations, down to a 34. And again, that is obviously going to be related to that variety was so much more immature than the others. But you'll see the range in staple length there is a much bigger range due to the variety. Whereas we look at the environment, and a lot of our environments are going to overlap. So just because it was a variety or an environment that had no maturity problems doesn't mean it was a long staple environment. Because environment, again, just doesn't play that big of a role. Same thing here, these immature environments, we still had fairly long staple lengths coming out of those, even though Micronaire was low. So they're kind of all related, but they're kind of all not, and everything's going to be weighted differently. So here's staple, much more stable looking graph. Typically we see a variety that performs well at one location, perform pretty well at all the locations. You don't really see that big flipping and flopping and that a lot of volatility across varieties from location to location. It's generally a long staple variety, produces long staple cotton at most locations because it's such a variety component. So if you compare the two, again, that visual is pretty obvious. That mess of lines there with Micronaire, more stable pattern there with the staple. So again, it's just going back to what influences these parameters. And really at the end of the day, you know, we're talking about things that we can't see. We don't measure them when we're picking or stripping cotton. You can't see them in the module or in the gin. But we got to think about what affects our bottom line. What can we do to impact our return on what we can't? And so a lot of times with staple, most varieties on the market are going to produce pretty good staple length. I mean, really you don't see a whole lot of varieties out there that are short staple. With Micronaire, it's a lot about mitigating risk and environment. You know, whether it's planting date, whether it is a variety component, we go to an earlier maturing variety, or whether we manage the crop with irrigation in our inputs and protecting that yield early to make sure we do mature the crop out in good conditions. So that kind of goes back to how we can affect these fiber quality parameters. Really, it's the same, just kind of summarizing what I just really covered, but again, it's all about when these processes occur in that fiber development process, and that they can be influenced by the environment, namely the environment that we are exposed to, the date that flower opens, becomes a white flower, and how long we get good heat conditions, good sun, good rainfall until we get that bowl to mature and open. Just because the bowl's open doesn't mean we're not going to low mic, but hopefully we get good conditions there to mature the fiber and produce a mature bowl. I'm going to quickly cover a couple other parameters that are probably a little less talked about, can still be an impact. So fiber strength, we kind of talked about that a minute ago. Quick definition on there. The force in grams required to break a bundle of fibers on a text unit in size. And a text is the weight in grams of 1,000 meters of fiber. Don't ask me where they get these terms from. I don't know. Again, I don't really delve into it that much. But it is primarily a variety characteristic, can be impacted by conditions, can be impacted by some nutrients. So potassium can be one of the nutrients. If we're deficient in potassium, we can see that affect strength. If you look at a lot of dryland fields that we had in Oklahoma this year, especially in the central part of the state and even moving north, potassium deficiency was not uncommon in a lot of fields we had. And so that's something that I like to keep an eye on as we get these class reports back week to week. What are the trends on these? If we start ginning more and classing more of those dryland fields, are we seeing that effect? How big of an impact? And I mean, you can't always relate it right back to potassium, but that's something that I know we saw a lot of this year in a lot of our dryland fields. Then we can talk about the fiber length uniformity. So this is kind of going back in with the staple length. So really this is related to maturity. Fibers reaching that optimal length. This can be impacted during the ginning process. Again, excessive cleaning, excessive drying, anything that's going to weaken those fibers and cause breakages will impact our uniformity. So really what this is a ratio between all the fibers in that sample, the average length of those, and the upper half length of the fiber. So it's that staple compared to everything over an average. So there's going to be a natural variation in fibers. You know, if you want to buy polyester, you're going to have 100% uniformity. It's man-made fiber, but that's cheating. So cotton, we're not going to be 100%. It's a natural fiber. There's going to be natural variation. It's going to impact yarn evenness and strength. Low uniformity is going to reduce the efficiency of the spinning process, obviously just like short staple will. The longer the fibers, the more uniform that fiber length, the more efficient that spinning process is going to be. Color grade, not going to spend a ton of time on this. That was the one thing that I was a little concerned about this year. Anytime we have cotton that sits out for a long time and gets weather effects and we don't get harvest aids on it or we get regrowth, color's a big concern. You're talking about white lint sitting out there, being exposed to these weathering effects, especially if we've got green material out there. And if we harvest anything that has got green material on it, we can get staining of that lint. So this chart here is kind of how we determine color. From my standpoint, a lot of times that's how I'll run some color numbers instead of looking at the classroom report. But the classroom report is the one that's going to give you the values that you would put into a loan calculator or give you the overall idea of what we're seeing. And this is what we're going to be reporting on those classing reports. They won't show us the plus B and RD. They'll show us these actual values. So again, impacted by the environment. We can also see some indirect impacts. So I don't know how much Jerry touched on stink bugs, but stink bugs can have an impact on color every now and then. You'd have to have a pretty bad infestation of stink bugs to really impact it, but you do see that happen every now and then. Or pathogens, anything that might stain the lint, cause injury on the lint, and stain that white lint. Again, obviously, if we have color problems, we want white cotton. If we don't have white cotton, we're going to impact that dyeing process and the efficiency of dyeing that lint. So exposure to sunlight, this is one of those things that's kind of a gamble. You can, if your cotton gets stained, you leave it out in the sun long enough, it might bleach it white. It also might make it even worse if it gets rained on or something else happens. So we're risking that additional weathering losses. One of the things, generally cotton's pretty safe. Once we get the module, it's pretty well protected, whether it be a round module or an old rectangle one. But those round modules obviously cover more of that surface area than those old rectangle ones do. So we don't generally see as much degradation in the module as we do if it's just sitting in the field. So at the end of this, really what we're talking about here is the value of cotton. It's not the production base, it's not how much we need to make pounds, it's how much those pounds are worth. And that really is important. U.S. cotton is known for being high quality. That's our market. A lot of countries grow cotton. There's several countries that grow way more cotton than we do, but they can't compete with our quality. And so this is really where we are, and this is why cotton works for us. Us in Australia grow high quality cotton, so we've got to stay in that market. And so to me, we talk a lot about yield, we talk a lot about pounds, we talk about a lot about all these other things. I think this is a lot of times the thing we don't think about with cotton is really the value and what really that brings to the table. So I put on here all these base rates for cotton. So of course, if you've done any cotton loan work or value work, 52 cents a pound, that base loan rate. And that's if you have a 34 staple, 41 color, 1 to 3 leaf, 26 to 28.9 grams per text strength, 3.5 to 3.6, or 4.3 to 4.9 mic, 80 to 82% uniformity, and no prep or bark calls, which I didn't even get into prep or bark, but believe me, you don't want that to show up on your classroom report. So if you want to look more into this, if you want to understand what maybe your growers are telling you or what they're seeing and why we're seeing an impact of fiber quality on their bottom line, a couple of things you can look at. I like the Upland Loan Schedule. It's really just about a 4-page sheet, and it will show you where premiums and discounts occur based on a variety of parameters and how they interact with each other. You can also obviously use a loan calculator. Either one of those you can Google, find them for free. The loan calculators from Cotton Incorporated, you can actually plug in your numbers and see where your discounts and premiums occurred, and was it an environmental factor, was it a variety factor? It can kind of help us understand that bottom line. Oklahoma's a great environment to produce cotton in. I mean, one of our probably worst environments would be the place that's traditionally produced, and that's the southwest corner. We produced cotton there for a long time. A lot of these newer environments we're pushing cotton in are very similar environments to where we see cotton produced in other parts of the country. Our benefit is our pest pressure, for the large part, tends to be lower than we see it in other places. We tend to have a little bit better rainfall and have a little bit less insect pressure than we see in the Mid-South. Now, we get to southeast Oklahoma, it's a little different. We're going to have increased pressure there. But we do have a good environment, not just for pounds, but for quality as well. So, in my opinion, understanding that interaction between fiber quality and where we're growing it and what we're doing is key to making sure we're making money. Pounds are great. I want to make money. That's what matters. So going back to that class report, how are we doing this year? So if we look at color grade, and I know this is small and y'all probably can't see it, so I'll read off as much as I can. So our color grade, 84% of our cotton class in Oklahoma to this point, up to this point in the year, this is year long, is either a 31 or a 41, but we're seeing a slight downward trend. So we're seeing more cotton this past week go towards those 41 colors. We really want to stay at 41. We do not want to get worse than that. So it's not a huge slip yet, but as more and more bales come in, we'll probably know more. Look at leaf grade down here. So 82% of our bales class at this point are either a 3 or a 4. That's pretty good. Generally, we won't see any discounts even at a 4 because we're going to have some other parameters that are going to keep us out of that boat. So Mike, 91% is either at the premium or the high end of the base. We're seeing a little trend, a little bit of a higher Mike, not what I would call high Mike cotton yet, but it's going that way. But in general, we're either premium or base. So that's pretty good news. Again, some of the areas that are going to be more prone to low Mike cotton may not be ginning their cotton in Oklahoma. They may be ginning it in Kansas or Texas. So we may have to rely on some producers to talk to us and see what they were seeing. Staple, our staple length right now, 80% of our staples between a 35 and a 38. So we're not worried about any discounts there, and that's pretty usual. Again, low staple cotton is fairly rare now. Strength, 84%, it's between a 28 and a 32. Again, no discounts so far for the majority of it. And then with the uniformity, 82% of it is at an 80 or higher. So 82% of it is at least in the base, if not into the premium range of uniformity. So overall, we're doing pretty good. We're probably not seeing the fiber quality that was around last year, but for the most part, we're at least base or average of where we want to be, with most of it trending to be pretty stable in those areas. And so wasn't an ideal fall for cotton, but it wasn't a bad one. And we're still making good pounds, and we're making good pounds at a decent quality. So overall, I think we're okay. I know that was a lot of numbers, probably one of the more boring talks I can do. I know it is. I think it's important, and I don't get a chance to talk about fiber quality very often because it's kind of a one-time-a-year deal. So if there's any questions on fiber quality, I'd be glad to take them. Another rough after-lunch talk. Thanks for hanging in there. If there's anything I didn't cover, I'll take it. Yeah, there's a lot of cotton there. That's a picked field, and we have been seeing some issues with, and it's not just pickers. We've had some humidity issues this year, and so we're going to start tagging. Once we get higher humidities, those plants usually get a little bit tougher, and we'll start tagging, especially after dark, a little more often. But you know, it's better in the module than it is still in the field for another day, I guess, at the end of it. So it's been a rough harvest year. I know that. So it's kind of the same premise, not so much from a dyeing standpoint, but if you think about a high Mike bale of cotton in a given unit of area, you've got fewer fibers. So you've got big, very mature, over mature fibers, still going to be hard to dye, and you got fewer of them. So it's kind of a coarser type deal.